Hello, my name's Cliff Raylick. I'm the Executive Director of Cinema St. Louis, and we're the presenters of the 29th Annual Whitaker St. Louis International Film Festival. We are absolutely delighted to have featured the documentary The Road Up by Greg Jacobs and John Siskel, the co-directors who are going to be joining us for a conversation momentarily. I want to mention the fact, and if you've done your reading of your synopsis, you know this, but they were responsible for an Audience Choice Award winner of ours several years back now, in 2010. It's been a whole decade. It's remarkable. Louder Than a Bomb. And I think The Road Up is a worthy successor to that film, a very inspirational film. We are also absolutely privileged to have joining us two of the people featured prominently in the documentary. Mr. Jesse Teverbaugh, who is the person who leads the sessions, transformations, and then one of the other subjects of the documentary who goes through that process, and that is Kristen Robinson. We are happy to have all of you here. Thanks for taking the time out of your schedules to talk with us. Let's begin the process with the sort of standard issue question that we give all documentarians. So Greg or John, how did you come across CARA, the nonprofit, and were you recruited to do this film? Did you make a decision? Yes, after looking at it, it's something we think we have, there's value, we could get a documentary out of it. Just walk us through the initial process of how you came to make The Road Up.
Well, I always, like to say sometimes documentaries find you and sometimes you find documentaries. And in this case, it was a documentary finding us. It was a friend of ours who was just having a dinner conversation with somebody who's been involved with CARA for a long time. And he was telling her all about the organization. And he said, I always thought it would make a great documentary because there are so many amazing people and stories that come through it. And she said, well, I just happen to know a couple guys who do this. So she connected us. And we went to see CARA in action. And just right from the very beginning, I think we were so blown away by the power of the people in the room and the power of their stories and the power and potential impact of what CARA does, that it's sort of, it's one of those things where right away, and then you're trying to find reasons why to not do something. And it never happens every time. All the time that you spend there and all the time you spend with the people there only make it clear that this is a fascinating idea and a fascinating story. And after a while, you're doing
it. Anything to add, our co-director?
Yeah, it was very much like Greg described, sitting in on the morning motivations sessions and hearing the participants' stories was so moving and so powerful. And also the sense of community, supporting each individual as they would enter this circle that takes place every morning at CARA was just really powerful to see and to be a part of. So, yeah.
All right, I'll be broadening to bring in the subjects in a minute, but I did want to, I imagine one of the things that you had to contemplate as directors before committing to this project is the fact that to some degree, you're in a room. I mean, you do break out, you follow the lives of others through the course of the people who were participants through the course of the film. But to some degree, you're in that room with Jesse as he leads these sessions. And obviously there's not a lot of visual variety, although there's immense amounts of variety with regard to the stories that are being told. But was that a concern initially? And then, what was your strategy with regard to how you were going to sort of break out of just that room?
Yeah, it was something that we spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about. We spent 1 month following a class, filming a class, just figuring out how we would fit in the room, how we would shoot, how we would cover it, making sure that we didn't interrupt the balance of the classroom, didn't want to pull students out of the important work of what Jesse was teaching. But yeah, just figuring out how we would do that aesthetically was a big challenge, and knew that a lot of it would be in here on faces, tight shots like that. And then we also knew that we wanted to follow a group of the subjects once the class was over. So that was part of the process.
And I think one question that sort of comes up always is the structure. How do you structure it so that it's not all front loaded with the class and then back loaded outside the class? And so, you know, what we ended up doing is doing a structure that in a way very quietly dispenses with chronology. And the class becomes kind of the trunk of the tree throughout. And we, you know, the branches are everybody's stories. And I think you don't necessarily, you're not necessarily concerned that there isn't a practical chronology. But what it does is allow us to kind of keep coming back to the room as, you know, this is sort of home base, but then we go out into the world and that, you know, I think helps us vary it up a bit. Otherwise it would be all one thing for the first half and then all everything else for the second half.
No, I thought it was a very, really deftly edited film from that point of view. To sort of weave those two threads together helped a lot, I think. But although the material in the room is riveting, there's no doubt about it. And that's thanks to Jesse. So let's bring him into the conversation. And this initially, the person who leads the conversations and sometimes the confrontations. Let's talk first about your agreeing to do this. Obviously, Kara was probably interested in having the program get wider exposure and the importance of the work that's being done there. But by the same token, you're opening yourself up, and the people who we'll talk to Kristen about this too. You're opening yourself up to a wider world, whereas those conversations taking place in the room are one thing. It's quite another to share those with the larger world. So Jesse, how did you wrestle at all with whether or not you wanted to be a participant in this?
Well, I did wrestle a little bit, but it wasn't because of those things that you just mentioned at the end. Again, I have been at Kara for now 18 years. So, I mean, those things that John and Greg captured on film and things I have been witnessing for decades. And I would always be, because I'm the only trainer in the room, and even though there's other staff members who are part of Kara and they know what our mission is, they know what our curriculum entails and things like that, it's nothing like being in it. We call our curriculum experiential curriculum. You have to experience it. I can't do a little PowerPoint or little Vanna White thing or go through some kind of 2 + 2 is 4. I have to put participants in a way that they're feeling it. And so even though all the things in the documentary that you saw is actually a class, a curriculum set up, there is an objective. And part of the way of how to doing it is, you know, you use people's personal stories so they can kind of feel it and experience it for themselves. So from that standpoint, I had been seeing these miracles and these things and these transformations for myself. And I've always wanted a way that, you know what, other people's voices and other people get to speak their truth and have their voices heard. And this was the opportunity that came up. And I was like, wow, you know, my prayer has been answered. The thing that I struggled with was, I did not want it to be commercialized. I did not want it to be scripted. I did not want it to be pretentious. I wanted to be just as raw and as real as it happens for every class that comes through Kara. And that was the only kind of concern that I had. But like John and Greg mentioned before, you know, it was talked about very early on, and we developed trust. We developed trust between each other. We had a little practice run with a class to, like they mentioned, to come up with all the logistics, where the cameras are set, the lighting, all of those kind of things, so they become part of the class and not something that's disrupting the class, where everybody is noticing that they're there. So they were very strategic about doing those things. But the only concern I had was that it gets portrayed in its truest and rawest form, and that as many people as possible get a chance to tell their story. And that's what I've always wanted, you know, people just just want to be heard. And these myths that we look at about people who are coming from poverty or unemployment and things like that, is not that person that's living outside or living underneath a viaduct or things like that. We come in all shapes, sizes, all colors, all religious beliefs, all sexual orientations, whatever. We are your brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, daughters. We're everybody. We are you. And that's what I was hoping to be captured.
And it very much is in the film. I think that all of your hopes were realized here in the final product. But we'll talk with you a little bit about that later. But let's now bring in Kristen, one of the other people who is captured so well in The Road Up. Kristen, let's explore some of the things that I just spoke with Jesse about. Again, you're going to be opening yourself up to a larger world. Again, revealing yourself in a classroom is one thing, revealing yourself to strangers who are going to be watching this, presumably at some point in movie theaters, but certainly on television screens. Was there any worry on your part that this is not something that you necessarily wanted to do? Or was it something that you actually embraced? Talk a little bit about your process in becoming a part of the movie.
Sure. I think that at first it wasn't anything that I really thought about. I knew that there was a camera crew when I first, well, let me actually give the backstory of that. I actually didn't want to do Kara at first. I was kind of persuaded into it by my dear mother and good friends who said, hey, at the worst, you could always quit, but why pass up an opportunity? And when I got there, there was a release form sitting at the front desk. And I was like, okay. But when I talked to Kara, they were like, it's just they're filming, you can say yes or no, etc. And as I got to experience the program more and went through my own journey, I realized that this was, and John came to me and said that, they were considering following me and whatnot. It was definitely a struggle with how am I going to be perceived. It's something that I still struggle with now, because this is something that is very easy to look at in the context of a or a documentary or an experiential curriculum. But as soon as we turn off the cameras and everything, people get real, So I just wanted to make sure, and what I finally decided within myself was I was going against my own will at the time. I was trying everything the opposite of what I was doing. And what I would normally do is say absolutely no. But I saw it as an opportunity to possibly help other people shine light on all of the issues that were going on there, and possibly use it as a platform to bridge the gap between more. And to piggyback off what Jesse was saying, that was one of the reasons, because in my journey, people are always telling me, you don't look like, I would never look at you and think that you've been through this, or I would never think that you've been through that. But the reality is the people that I was hanging out with look like someone who might have been hanging out under Wacker Drive. And they also look like, Joe Biden. So, hey, that's just the reality of addiction, poverty, and homelessness. There's levels to it. And, at the end of the day, they used to tell us, you're homeless if you just are living with someone and you don't have a lease, or, you know what I'm saying? There's levels to it. So that was pretty much my process. And I'm glad that I did it ultimately. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to loop back to that and the sort of feelings you have toward the documentary after the fact, and as other people have you've seen it, other people have seen it, and reactions. But let's first turn back to Greg and John and talk a little bit about, initially, obviously, you had to get the permission of all the students who were going to be participating in the class to at least say, presumably most of them say yes in order to be able to shoot. How much cooperation did you get? How much pushback did you receive with regard to people who said, no, I don't want to be a part of it? And you can obviously shoot around to some degree in the class, and then you're going to be making choices as to who you want to ultimately follow, and identifying people from the class that you felt were particularly compelling and had stories that we could relate to. But Was there any issue initially in getting the cooperation of the people who were attending the class?
I don't recall anybody in either of the classes. Again, we filmed 2 sessions, and I don't recall anybody opting out. And once we were doing it the second time, and it was probably about midway, maybe a week or 2 in, when we began having conversations with the individuals that we followed, and a few other people who we followed a little bit afterwards, but fell off. We lost touch with them. But Greg, yeah, I don't recall anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a always a complicated process, and it is always fraught continually. But and so we're hyper aware of it when we're there, and when, especially at the beginning, I tend to be a very shy person, and so you kind of hang back and hope that the people that are there and the people that you're filming become comfortable and come to trust you, even though the interaction isn't a lot of it, because they're doing the class and they're living their own lives. But there was one point about a week and a half in, we're thinking about this constantly, and every day we're there, and somebody who was a very well-respected member of the class, of that community, came up to us after, sort of midway through the day, and just said, "We just wanted to say, we really appreciate your being here and your being on this journey with us." And that, I'm sure he did not speak for everybody, but it sent a signal to us that there was at least a sense that we were now a part of this process and a part of this journey. And I think that was a really meaningful step for us. It never ends, that complication. But it certainly, I think that moment really helped clarify that we weren't necessarily intruding, but in a way we were sort of just part and parcel of the particular experience that this class was having. And hopefully that continues.
Okay, Jesse, I'm curious. You mentioned the fact that you've been at this almost 2 decades now. When you first started, however, leading these classes, how have you evolved with regard to your own approach? Like, as I mentioned, sometimes you can be quite confrontational. You really put people through an emotional roller coaster with regard to confronting them, making certain that they acknowledge the issues that they need to really sort of grapple with. How comfortable were you doing that initially, as opposed to you wanted to be a friend to everybody? You are a friend to everybody ultimately, of course, but you do not necessarily come off as the nicest guy at times during the course of the class. So how did you arrive at that approach?
Yeah, well, I mean, you said it's still uncomfortable to this day, and I've done hundreds, thousands of those sessions of things. It's always uncomfortable. Even after each of those classes, I have to decompress. Even after the 4-week sessions, I take a week off just to decompress, because I do go on that journey. Again, not only that do I participate and go on the journey that the participants take me on, I'm reliving and going on my own personal journey as well. And so that keeps my feelings and my things up front as well, and it kind of keeps me grounded. How I came to this and using and even when I'm training my own personal trainers, people might see me train and they want to duplicate me and things like that. You have to find your own self and your own platform to be as authentic as you can. What I found when I was in that circumstance, when I was a participant, when I was a Kara student, what I needed in my life was some structure, right? Again, one of our participants, we have our Tribute to the Stars weekend. One of the alumni graduates came and they talked about being an imposter and wearing this mask. Again, I come from a 2-parent family. I've always had a solid foundation and support system. I was the big dude on campus in high school, big dude on campus in college. I've always had this kind of following and people who looked up to me. And so now when the carpet got pulled underneath my life and I was at the bottom of the rung, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I didn't want my parents to see me in that position, all of those things. But when I finally came to grips that, you know what, I got to do something about this. This is not going to be my last story. What I needed in my life was some structure. I needed structure because Jesse has the ism. And the ism that Jesse has, that I found out that a lot of us have when we get to those, that we think we know it all. I think I know everything. I think I'm the smartest dude in every room I walk into. And I got to keep me a little pen in my hand and bust my bubble to kind of take the air out so I can start listening to other people who might have some answers that I might not have considered. But the number one thing that everybody needs at that time when their lives come unraveled is structure. I need some direction. Tell me to go what direction I need to go in, because otherwise it's just too overwhelming. So one thing I want to provide is structure. I want you to be, when we do be in class, I want you to be present to what's going on right then at that moment. And in order to do that, I've got to get you to start feeling like a human being again. Because when you get to that point, you stop caring. I think Kristen mentioned it in part of her story too, but it's kind of the common denominator with a lot of people go through that. You stop caring, you don't give a damn, and you stop feeling, which is not being a human being. Human beings feel, right? And so how do I get people to start feeling again and start having some structure? And another thing too, that again, a lot of my things or the techniques that I use is I'm a big sports fan. I've always been an athlete. I'm still a weekend jock type athlete. So I use coaching kind of techniques that when you're coaching a superstar, now they got all the talent in the world, but again, you got to find out who can be coached hard, who you have to coach with rubber gloves, who can you kind of give and take depending on what they're going through. But people who've got God-gifted gifts still need to be coached. And how do you find a way to get in and be coached? And it ain't not about being a friend. It's good if I wind up being friends, but I ain't there to make friends with you. I need you to respect me, right? But I'm not here, and I believe they respect me more than wanting to be my friend, and even sometimes, and they respect me because I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to be so worried about hurting your little feelings. That's cool. Get your little feelings hurt. We can get that back together. But I'm going to tell you the truth. And in a lot of cases, we have not been told the truth, whether it be by our loved ones, family members, or friends, because we figure if I tell you the truth, how really screwed up and how messed up that decision was, you might drift away from me and won't come back because I hurt your feelings or something like that. And so that is the thing, I think, the connection I make. At least they can understand and come and know that they can trust me, that I will not lie to them, and I will tell them the truth.
Okay, let's now turn to Kristen and talk a little bit about your experience having gone through that process. You noted the fact that you were initially resistant. You weren't enthusiastic about participating in this program, but decided to not follow your instincts and to instead say yes, even though that was not something that you were naturally inclined to do. When you were confronted with this sort of approach that Jesse takes, was that something that you found particularly helpful, that you perhaps need it more from other people? Or did it take somebody who was outside of your circle to do that, as opposed to a family or friend? So just talk a little bit about why you thought Kara and Jesse's approach was successful with you.
Sure. I think that as far as Jesse's coaching, I was willing to participate in that because clearly from the jump, he has a supernatural ability to transform people. And I have a very similar ability, but I haven't honed that yet. Okay. So just like Jesse is very able to, I teach as well. I'm actually teaching visual arts right now in Cleveland. And that's something that I've always wanted to do. And that is definitely part of my teaching philosophy. You don't have to be my friend. That's part of my philosophy in life: self-observation, being honest, being humble. And, Greg and John can tell you too. Like, I'm just shoot from the hip, you know, like I don't know how else to do it, because when you get to the point where you, like Jesse said, you literally don't feel human anymore. You need someone to reel you in and kind of light a fire under, you know what, and be like, hey, like this is just what it is. One of the best examples of that that's been brought up, and not to jump ahead, but like with Clarence, when Clarence got terminated, you know, that's a moment that people bring up to me all the time that are like, wow, was it really like that? And it's like, would you do that? And it's like, you know, yeah, you know, I know what it's like to be on both sides of that. I know what it's like to because you know, I tell my student, like, hey, at the end of the day, like this is your job, you know, like it doesn't matter. There is no excuse. There's no excuse for it. But at the same time, I also know how it is to have burned every bridge you possibly have and feel like there is no reaching out to people, even though there's somebody like Jesse, even though there's people telling you you're a rock star every day and all of that. You know, this is a disease, you know what I mean? Like your mindset and addiction, the mindset of poverty, the mindset of homelessness, this is real neurological things, you know what I'm saying? There's a habit, there's a way that you've been living, there's a way that you've been thinking that has to be broken. And so I was able to accept that and recognize that that was a piece of greatness that I wanted to have. And it was cool. You know, I think my hardest part about Kara was that up into a certain point in my career, I've always been more of an entrepreneur. So I've always respected people's time and, you know, all of that. But when it comes to, hey, I had to get up every day. I was living off the Howard stop. I was about an hour away. I had to get up at 4:30 every morning just to make sure I got there, because I was going to, you know, I was going to be out and over with if I didn't. I had to make sure that like I packed my lunch. I had to make sure, you know, there were all of these little details that and structure that I didn't have. You know, I never had to worry about what I, you know, oh, is this business corporate or is this casual you know, like what, who cares? Like this is, you know, this was completely something that I did not care about. But, you know, in hindsight is something that, you know, I would not be the same if I did not go through it. So I can say that about it.
And was it true that having the sort of outside perspective that Jesse represented and Kara represented was what was going to be actually necessary for you to take that next step? That, you know, obviously family and friends you mentioned had tried to encourage you down certain paths and you presumably were resistant to it. Did it require, is that why this program is so valuable, to have that sort of outsider's perspective brought to bear?
Like outsider in the sense that it's just not your family and
Yeah.
friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's the combination of both. I think it's a combination of an outsider and the fact that you have a literal arena that you go to every morning. One of the parts that they didn't capture is every morning there's an exercise in public speaking where there's a homework assignment that Jesse gives you, or a question that's outside of the great room. That could be, what's like a question, Jesse? Like,
what is your greatest fear and what are you doing to overcome it?
Right. So when we
gives you great joy?
Right. So what gives you great joy? What is your greatest fear? So when we leave Kara that night, we have to think about these questions, because in the morning in that circle that you saw us in, it's someone's job to come up and tap you on the back, and you might be called to stand up and talk about it, and you have to sing a song. You have to sing a little song afterwards, you know, and it's like, it's a lot, you know, so there's all of these elements. So yeah, I think it was the structure of the program and someone who was an outsider who definitely had the dynamic of, you know, like coming in, if Jesse was anybody else, you know, it wouldn't be the same if it was anybody besides Jesse, because there's not a lot of people who have that dynamic. And that's one of the things that also was brought to light about my journey and the people around me. I think we realized like there's a value in the fact that we know how to interact with so many different types of people. We know so much about so many different things and how to move, and, you know, not just how to survive, but how to communicate and make things happen. And I think that was that was a great factor in that.
Okay, well, let's return to the filmmakers for a little bit. Greg and John, talk a little bit about the process of what you were looking for when you were identifying the people who you were going to follow outside of the room in which these sessions were taking place. You mentioned that a couple of them fell by the wayside. It seems, having become familiar with Kristen in the film, she would have been a slam dunk, it seems to me. You would have immediately recognized her as being somebody who you were going to be interested in. But how did you go about that process of winnowing down, these are the people that we think are going to be particularly representative and interesting?
We had spent this previous month filming another class, but we had also started prior to that going out and meeting some of the other programs that kind of feed into CARA. So we had been to Sister House, where Elisa was a resident. We had been to St. Martin de Porres, where Tamala was a resident, and Tamala was someone who we had met before the class even started. I had spent some time there. We had spent some time filming, and Tamala was always someone who just, again, like Kristen, jumped out as having an incredible story and ability to communicate that story. So that's how we met Tamala. And then with some of the others, again, just being in that classroom for the 30 days, certain people just start to bubble up. And, Elisa is such a beautiful, dynamic person, her smile, her laugh. We started to identify the different individuals that we wanted to follow.
And I think there's an element of, you start to also see the way other people are responding to those people. And so, for example, Kristen's a perfect example where from the very beginning, you could see that people just had a presence and a respect that came, built in a way from people. Even if some of the people may have driven her crazy, that there was just a sense that, like, this is someone special in this class. And, Krista was just talking about her one superpower. I would say another superpower that she has, and that we were looking for the folks that we were going to follow, is the capacity to both to both go through the experience and describe it. Yeah. And Kristen is one of the, I don't know if I've seen many people, if any, who can do that as well. The capacity to sort of feel and experience, but also then communicate in really profound ways to people who aren't feeling that or experiencing it, what it means to be feeling this way and experiencing this way. And I think, there are little phrases, for example, in the movie, there's one in the scene where she's talking about her housing issues, and she says, they go home at night and they have locks on their doors. And that, to me, that one phrase encapsulates so much more than what, a million words can say about that. So there was, I think each of the folks that we ended up following had their own very compelling way of talking about the experiences that they were having. And that emerged over the course of the class and sort of became very apparent that they would be able to communicate to an audience what this is like, rather than just be seen on screen. And I think that was crucial.
Can I, do you mind if I jump in and maybe piggyback on a few things? So part of my newfound respect for filmmakers, again, I've always been a movie buff. As a matter of fact, I think I told John this before. His uncle, Gene Siskel. I went to movies depending on how Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel kind of critiqued movies and stuff. So I've always gone to movies, but I've always gotten into movies because of the actors. It was the actors and the stars that I attached and connected to, and I thought that it was the actors who were the ones who that created that magic. But again, it's truly an artistic and a gift for movie makers to be able to make that story come to life. Yeah, it is the characters, but it's truly the filmmakers. And part of even my conversations with John and Greg at the beginning, I don't believe, and I don't want to take liberties, and John and Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that there was a storyline at the beginning on, okay, this is what we're going to tell, and this is the story. You know, like in the movies, you have a script. Somebody writes a script, somebody writes a story, and you just start finding and telling that story. I don't believe there was that blank page that we had a script, and this was what the story was going to be. This is going to be the beginning, this is going to be the middle, and this is going to be the end, and they'll ride off into the sunset and live happily ever after, and yada yada yada. I don't think that was the idea from the very beginning. And I think what happened, and what we're just talking about, after filming, the story started telling itself. It started creating itself, and because they had all this fantastic footage of the story, you can then start putting the pieces of how this story gets told. You know, that it's just not a bunch of people that's just living haphazard. There's a story, there's a timeline on how they got to this point. There's a present time on how they're dealing and living in this point. There's a time after the point that goes on as well. And I think that the genius and the creative artistic talent that they did, because I'm just totally blown. I'm not just doing the John and Jacob's Siskel and Jacob's commercial, but I am truly amazed, because we're talking about almost 2 years of filming, or a year and a half. I mean, well, it was the 2 months, but again, it was a lot of following. To take all of that footage and to put it together in that type of story, I mean, it was just truly amazing. So to be able to sit back and not let your own kind of maybe egos go and say, oh, I want it to go this way, and I want it to look like this, and to allow that story to tell itself, I think it's an amazing feat. And that's the one thing that I'm so impressed about the whole documentary.
Well, you have discovered the magic of documentary in the sense that people can't go in with a notion that they're going to have this set outcome. They write the film in the editing, after having captured all that footage, trying to then assemble it into a narrative that will be appealing to people who are watching is the great feat of documentarians. The script writing occurs at the end.
Had no idea that occurred. Had no idea. I thought it was already preconceived, and they just put it together on how they went. That's what I thought, and I've been totally proven wrong. And this is to their credit, because they're absolutely fantastic at what they do.
Well, it's to their credit, and also the subjects.
We have to give a shout out to our editor, John Farbrother, who we have been collaborating with for years. He's an incredible editor. So very fortunate to have him on board again. And it's a collaborative process, not just between myself and Greg and our director of photography and our editor, but with our subjects. And without that access, without that trust, without you guys allowing us to tell your story, we couldn't do it. And Kara, you know, allowing us entry into that world was incredible, and never told us what road to take, what part of the story to tell. It was just access, and you guys do your thing. We're deeply indebted.
And one thing that I wanted to explore with you anyway, and this is a perfect time to do it, and that is you delay the delivery of Jesse's own personal story until the conclusion of the film, where there would have been a temptation, I think, on a lot of people's part to front load the film with that story. Now, I'm presuming, again, there was a little bit of fractured chronology in the film, but I'm presuming that's also what Jesse does in the class. Is that right? That he delays telling his own story, and so you were to some degree emulating what he does. So you were somewhat following his lead, but that was a brilliant move. So both of you as filmmakers, and then also Jesse, why do you make that choice? Why do you wait to reveal?
Go ahead, Jesse.
No, go ahead.
All right, our answer is probably shorter and less interesting, so I'll go first. I think we just wanted to capture a little bit of what the feeling of what the people in the class, the participants, are experiencing. There's this guy who's funny and he's yelling at them and he's making them go through all these emotional things, but he's kind of a mystery. He's a cipher. What is he? Like, he dresses nicely, he could be anything. And so to sort of have that reveal at the end, we wanted to put the audience through that too. You go through the whole movie and you're like, well, who is this guy? And there's a point where he asked people, what did you think I did before I came to Kara? And people are saying, drill sergeant, motivational speaker. And I love, everybody had very distinctive laughs. Kristen has a especially distinctive laugh. And there's one, I think, when someone says drill sergeant and you just hear her in the background crack up. So it was really just about capturing, in a sense, what the class is going through for the audience.
So Jesse, how did you make that decision in the class? Did you do that right from the beginning when you were going through these sessions, or was that something that you arrived at a certain point and felt that this was the right time?
No, I mean, I've done it and used it as my technique on how I teach with all my classes. None of them know. And I asked specifically after end of each session that, I asked, please do not share part of my story with new coming students and participants to come in. Please don't give that away. And again, a part of it is it's this idea you have to earn the right to know somebody's story. You just don't get and let somebody know your story. And so again, part of that is you shared and did all of that and opened yourself and shared with me some of the things you probably have not shared with maybe your closest family members and friends. I owe you that right, one, is to make sure I share that with you. But part of it is just still, like I mentioned, this mystique and how we can kind of get it wrong and start defining ourselves as our mistake. And so I see myself as this person who isn't worthy of the best life has to offer. And I'm a screw up and I made all these bad decisions. But we look at these people that we pass by on the street every single day. And I think Kristen just said it, that's a Joe Biden, that's anybody else. I pass around all these people on the street and put them up on this pedestal thinking that, oh, wow, success and happiness and joy must be for those type of people. That's not for me. And when they see that, I'm just like you. And if we give ourselves an opportunity to just be human and say, I've made a mistake. And now that they've seen me and they think and start judging me by this facade or this suit or this job that I have, that I'm just like you and I've had the same challenges and struggles. And the biggest thing I want to do is dispel this myth, because a lot say, well, Mr. Jesse, you just don't understand. You just don't get it. You don't understand. You got a job. Yeah, but again, what a part of it is, I understand more than you think I do. Because as a matter of fact, one thing I don't forget how it feels to be in that situation. It's not about being homeless or having addiction or being criminal background record and being incarcerated. That's not the thing. That's the symptom behind something bigger. The bigger issue and the virus is hopelessness. I know how it feels to have hopelessness, that you don't feel any hope. I don't care if you got a college degree, a master's degree, you've had all type of other jobs and experiences, whatever, a nice family surrounding, whatever. Again, once that hopelessness sets in and you cannot see a glimmer of light at the end of a tunnel, it is the worst feeling in the world. And I know how that feels, right? And so I want people to understand at the end that, not to ever get to that part where you feel that there is no hope. If it can happen to somebody like me because they have put me on this pedestal, it can happen to anybody. And if it happens again, it don't mean the story is over with. I can get back up and I can get it put it back together again. And so it's strategically, I've made a conscious strategic decision not to share that until the end.
All right. I wanted to also ask both of you this couple of the subjects of the film. Now that you've seen the movie, you've had opportunities, I presume, to also encounter other people who have seen the film. Was it what you were expecting from the point of view of witnessing yourself on that screen from somebody else's perspective? Was it fun? Was it frightening? Was it revealing in some sort of fundamental way that you weren't expecting? So if both of you want to just sort of chime in with regard to your reactions after the fact to having gone through this experience. Kristen, we'll start with you.
I would say it was just real, you know. It was interesting to see myself in that was another reason why I chose to do it, was because that was probably the most vulnerable position I've ever been in my life. Like Jesse said, hopelessness, you know, poverty, you know, added on, piled on, I was there, humility, you know, so I kind of just wanted to see what I look like, you know, as an angel, because that's the closest thing, you know, that's probably the most humbled and pure and willing to accept and open that I've probably ever been. So it was just interesting to see what that looks like, and you know, and also as far as other people and their opinions and whatnot, you know, overall it has been, you know, supportive. Excuse me. It's definitely, excuse me. It's definitely brought, it's definitely connected me with people from the past. It's definitely allowed me to help people, like even the Chicago Film Fest. I was able to, people reached out to me that I had no idea were going through the same issues, that were like, oh my God, can you talk to my son? Can you talk to my friend? Can I, you know, get a pass so I could show this to someone because of X, Y, and Z? And just the ability to be able to help. And that was like really the only reason why I really felt like something awesome could come out of this, was to be able to share that and give somebody else a piece of it, and stick with that, you know? So yeah, it's been real, and it's been rewarding.
And Jesse, how about you?
I mean, when I first watched it, and even again, I've seen it now. I guess this weekend might have been. This is my fifth time, and I've seen it with different audiences. When John and Greg first showed it to us, when it was first done as kind of a draft, and it hadn't been really tightened together. I saw it with just my mother and my sister, and I saw it in a different light. When I saw it the second time they put together, they allowed us to invite some friends, and I invited my best friend and his wife and another friend, and I still saw some other things. And even now, when we went to the drive-in and saw it there, I saw it with some other family members, and my high school alumni, they put a contingency together and had a bunch of cars. And so it was an opportunity of people who actually thought that they knew me to really know and get to see me. And part of even some things when I seen in there, I was like, I said that? Did I say that? And it just reminded me just how in tune and present I am when I'm in that moment. That is, it's almost like an unconscious kind of thing. It's not like, again, I could not tell you where those cameras were or anything like that when it was going in, because I was so present to what was going on now. So it was me viewing it was like it just gave me a sense of pride, one, in the organization that is CARA, but also believing in that curriculum that we developed and put together as well, and to being able to see how it turns out. Like I mentioned before, there is an objective of the curriculum, but it does not go the exact same way every time. The objectives are met, but it goes, and there's leaps, there's turns, there's curves, there's all of those things. So to be able to see that on film and in camera, and in that connected story the way it is, It was amazing. You got to understand, that's a month class. That's a 4-week class. And they condensed it into a 90-minute film, of course, with the other stories on outside of the classwork too. So you can imagine there's a whole lot of other things. Well, for whatever reason, it'll be a 3-day movie if they captured everything. But to capture those kind of elements, to be able to get somebody to understand actually what the essence of those classes meant was enlightening. The other one is, like Kristen said, I'm probably seeing myself. I looked at her and said, "Damn, dude, you huge, dude.
Oh yeah.
What's up with that belly?" I've sensed though again because of that. When I saw him, like I've lost 40 pounds. Seriously, I'm like, man, dude, you got to do something about that. But again, it brought me back too, and I remember I was going through a bad relationship at that time, and I was going through a breakup. And part of my therapy and part of what kept me together was my release was that classroom, because outside of that classroom, I was a wreck. I was a total wreck. You know, I'm a human being just like everybody else, and I was going through things. But that was my comfort space. That was my place where I can be safe and feel at home and get my therapy and get my juices regenerated. Because other than that, if I hadn't had that classroom or being able to have that vehicle at that time, man, I'd have been messed up. Because again, I was going through another rough time in my life, and it still kind of uh, made the fact known that, you know what, this is life. Life don't stop happening. We're gonna have difficult times in our life, and they're gonna continue to happen. But if I can connect and continue to get and grow and have coping skills and learn how to lean on people and not and have some humility and those kind of things, that's when things start to get out of control, when we get into this spiral and they get so bad that it's hard to pull ourselves back up for. But again, that kind of just brought back memories about that, because I was in a difficult space in my own personal life during that time.
Let's wrap this up by asking for an update on the other characters. Kristen has mentioned the fact that she's in Cleveland now, teaching visual art. Did you want to expand on that at all, Kristen?
Yes, please do.
Right now I'm teaching visual arts for a nonprofit. It's called Broadway School of Music and the Arts. And as of March, it's been all on Zoom up until maybe like the past month, where I've been able to kind of interact with a classroom of about 6. I teach 8th grade right now, and I'm also starting a nonprofit called the Ecofeminist Action Institute. And that's what I'm working on right now.
Very ambitious. John and Greg, can you bring us up to speed on what's been happening in the lives of the other folks that we were introduced to in the road up?
Sure. Unfortunately, we have lost touch with Clarence. I was last in touch with him probably about 1.5 years ago, but we've lost touch with him. So hoping to reconnect around the film, and really looking forward to that. Elisa is in Trinidad with her family, with her kids. I think just before COVID hit, she went down there and has remained down there, probably due to travel restrictions, but I think she's coming back to the Chicago area sometime in the new year, hopefully. And Tamala has gotten married. Really wonderful guy who we all got to meet at the screening for everybody. And she's doing well. She's doing really well. So.
Well, great. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to have this conversation as a follow-up to the road up. I'm sure people who have watched the film, and presumably everybody watching this has already watched the film, I think have received a lot more added value having heard from you outside of the movie. As great as that is, it's also wonderful to hear from the filmmakers and to get that outsider's perspective on whether the subjects actually like what was presented on screen. I'm sure you are gratified that they appeared to do exactly that, that they loved what they saw. All right, well, thank you so much. Best of luck as you get this film out into the world, which is, well, I should ask that. Where do you hope to go next, given the pandemic and the challenges that you're facing with regard to getting the sort of traditional rollout of a film?
I think given the pandemic, we hope to go anywhere, please. Take whatever. I think all bets are off right now. Obviously, as you know more than anybody, trying to pull together a film festival in all of this. It's so great to have the festivals as part of this process. And even though everything is different this year, I think what we're discovering is that it is still incredibly meaningful and vital for us as filmmakers to be able to connect with the audiences in that way. So first off, thank you for all the work that you're doing to make this happen in this crazy time. And then after that, I think it's the kind of film I don't know that we would have ever had a smash, box office theatrical release at any point with this, but who knows? It's a movie that I think a year ago meant one thing, and I think the events of the last 6 months have made it something entirely different for a lot of people. If you were already thinking about the intersection of race and poverty and unemployment, then the film meant something to you, but not everybody was a year ago. I think now these issues are front and center, and I think the film is an incredibly timely movie now, when it maybe wasn't a year ago. So our hope is, I think, that it can provide a window on the experiences that millions of Americans were already having, but millions and millions more are now having. And that can be a vehicle for conversation for people from all different avenues of society over the next year. Everything may change in the next, with the election, which already happened, I guess, right? People will be watching this. So we won't spoil that for you. But I think our hope is that because of the timeliness, because the times have turned the movie into something that is now very urgent, that we will find receptive audiences, both in the film festivals and then, in the distribution and streaming services as well.
All right, great. Well, again, thanks to you all for participating in this conversation, and we hope that the folks who watch the film here in St. Louis spread word and encourage people to seek it out as it makes its way out into the wider world.
Can I add one last thing?
Sure, Jesse.
That Greg just mentioned. He said, I don't know if it will have ever made a big box office kind of thing. I would kind of reel back on that, and I can just base that on my own personal experience, and not to mention just because my family and friends who've seen it, of course, they have a vested interest in it because they know me, but because of them and their word of mouth, they have told total strangers who don't know me from a scrap on the wall, who have had the same response to it. And from their experience and from their rebuttal and their critiquing of it that they've sent in and told my friends and things like that, everybody is just amazed and saying this needs to be seen more. It needs to be accessible to other people. So I think if found the right vehicle, how it can get to the masses, man, don't sleep on I think you have a sleeper here. For real, for real.
I was just thinking, I agree. I was just thinking that our special effects aren't as good as some of the other movies, but I totally agree.
All right. Well, let's end on that note. Thanks again to all of you.
Thanks, Cliff.
Hello.